we're going to talk a little bit about the SEC first, because I think that is by far the one that I will tell you NBA scouts are most interested in.
Yeah.
Undeniably. For people listening at home, it's still going to be fine. You're just not going to be able to look at the bracket like people are on the YouTube channel. But this will at least give us a real road in terms of the prospect matchups that are likely to happen, could happen, everything like that. Okay. When you look at the SEC tournament here, where you see Ole Miss, South Carolina, we immediately get one. Gigi Jackson playing on Wednesday this week in the United States. And then if South Carolina does win against an Ole Miss team that, Kermit Davis has already been removed from that position, they then get to play Tennessee. That's an interesting game.
They've been clobbered by the Volunteers twice this year. I think Gigi had his worst performance against the Volunteers. I actually did a video breakdown of the first time that they faced off this year over on my YouTube channel. So a quick shameless plug there. But it's a tough matchup because Tennessee's so strong defensively. The Gamecocks don't have much offensive player movement, ball movement, and they have a lot of different bodies that they can throw who are experienced at a guy like Gigi Jackson when he wants to go one-on-one. They're also a disciplined, like motion-based offensive team that can grind you out a little bit more and expose help defensive flaws. Like it's a really tough game for Gigi. He has not shown particularly well in the games that he's played against the Volunteers this year. You would hope that he can learn something and put a little bit of change into practice. It's hard to make the same mistakes 3 times against the same team and not kind of learn from it or show growth. So for me, that's what I'm going to be looking for from Gigi Jackson. If South Carolina is able to advance and end up moving to day 2 of the SEC tournament, is can he just show a little bit better than he has against Tennessee? Because those first 2 were really tough.
Okay, so the matchups that I'm looking at here particularly, let's start with Arkansas and Auburn, right? So right here, Arkansas ends up as the 10th seed in this tournament, despite having Anthony Black and Nick Smith. Not great. They're going to make the NCAA tournament, and this is a team that could be dangerous in the NCAA tournament, depending on matchups, especially given that Eric Musselman is very, very good at scheming and figuring out weaknesses to exploit against opposing teams. Having said that, this Auburn matchup is going to be a really good one to watch from an NBA draft perspective in a number of different ways, I would say, because Arkansas is a team with these bigger guards. Anthony Black is 6'7". Nick Smith is 6'5". Auburn is going to play lineups where they have 2 undersized guards out there a lot of the time. Zep Jasper is 6'1". Wendell Green is 5'11". KD Johnson's 6 foot tall. Like there are real moments where this group is going to be drastically undersized against Arkansas. And it's going to be really interesting. I mean, they beat Arkansas by 13 earlier this year. That was without Nick Smith, obviously. But it feels like Arkansas has never gotten it back together, gotten it back on track ever since the Trevon Brazile injury, as much as anything. That Trevon Brazile injury was enormous for them because it really hindered their lack of floor spacing around Anthony Black and Nick Smith. Auburn is big in the front court. They will play Janai Broome. They will play who's the other big one? Jalen Williams, the 6'8" kid that is a monster athlete that goes out and blocks shots. They will have Dylan Cardwell, who's a bigger 6'11" kid. They'll occasionally play Yohan Traore, depending on the matchup, right? He hasn't played a ton recently, but there are visions where you could see them trying to go to him if things really break right. So I look at this game as being really intriguing from an NBA draft perspective because Anthony Black and Nick Smith are guys that aren't really going to have space to operate on the interior. They're going to have to live and die almost by the 3-point shot, it feels like, or by getting out in transition. And they're going to have to match up with these smaller guards. I trust Anthony Black in that regard. We're going to see with Nick Smith a little bit more defensively and how much he can lock in a elimination style game. So I'm really, really, really excited to see the way that this game could work out and the way that this matchup could end up bearing itself out.
Yeah, the half court spacing is going to be just awful from both teams. Like Auburn's offense is not a joy to watch by any means, and Arkansas doesn't have a ton of 3-point floor spacing. I think this is a big game for Anthony Black because offensively, he's going to need to show that he can either mismatch post some guys and just use his physicality and strength to overwhelm on offense and be a mismatch opportunist, or space the floor. The other side of things, too, I think that he's going to have a really good game against Wendell Green, because if he can force turnovers, Auburn's offense is very static. And by that, I mean ball kind of gets pounded in the middle third of the floor while there's screening happening off ball, things going on in the paint on the baseline. It's an opportunity for him to use his size, his length, his lateral quickness to try to pressure and create turnovers. I think that's where Musselman's teams are usually at their most dangerous, which is where they can really fly around and create pressure on the perimeter defensively. So if Anthony Black can be the tone setter in that regard, get Arkansas transition points, be able to get out and attack the basket, get 8-10 points in that regard, now the half court stuff isn't as big of a bother or going to drag them down a little bit more. So big game for Arkansas.
Yep. The other one in that second round is Mississippi State and Florida. Mississippi State particularly, I think, would pose an intriguing matchup for Alabama in the quarterfinals in the next round. This is a team that played Alabama pretty tight, actually, in both games that they played against them this year. That game in January where they were at home, that was a 3-point game that Alabama really had to make a bit of a run later in the game in order to get that win. Brandon Miller ends up with 13-6, 2 assists in that game. Looking through the box score now, Javon Quinterly actually played really well in that game. Mississippi State has one of the best defenses in the country. They're a top 10 defense in the nation, according to KenPom. I would point out that this is a team that really, really could pose some interesting question marks for Alabama. They're also a team that's on the bubble, which means that there will be a real drive from them. So that's what I would be hoping to get in the quarterfinals here. I hope we get Mississippi State, Alabama. I would hope that we also get Kentucky playing someone in the finals from an NBA draft perspective, or at least hopefully we get Arkansas, Kentucky again, because that would give us Cason Wallace against Anthony Black and Nick Smith, as long as Cason Wallace can get healthy here moving forward. Seems like he will be able to play in the conference tournament, but doesn't necessarily don't necessarily have that completely borne out yet.
Yeah, war of attrition again from an NBA draft perspective. Arkansas, Kentucky, Alabama are the big teams to watch, which mate with major high level prospects. But from a college basketball and like how solid they are as a team standpoint, Missouri and Texas A&M are just absolutely fantastic. I want to give a quick shout out to Kobe Brown at Missouri. Really underrated player for them. Might end up being in the conversation for SEC Player of the Year. 6'8", like power wing who can pass, dribble, shoot a little bit. Versatile on the defensive end of the floor. Dennis Gates can coach his ass off at Missouri. Like whoever, it looks like they're going to play Tennessee. If Missouri can move on from that, I could also see them giving Alabama some fits.
Yeah, definitely agree. The other one worth watching is obviously that G.G. Jackson game against Ole Miss. That will likely, or it could be, on either. The way to put it is either Wednesday or Thursday will in all likelihood be the last time you can see G.G. Jackson play college basketball this season. So I would say that could be a valuable one. He's a very polarizing prospect for front offices, and we will see if that ends up being true throughout the process.